So welcome to Top Tip Tuesday. This evening we are going to be talking about why we do not offer to help our children when they are mastering a task, when they are completing a task. And the example I gave, which inspired this post and then this Insta Live session, was Harry buttoning his shirt for the first time a couple of days ago. So we've had lots and lots of practice with buttoning, just in daily life, obviously me helping him to get dressed for the past 3 years. And when we change the bed sheets every week, he and Olivia are part of that. And so he's had lots of practice with me and with Olivia. Olivia, of course, is a much better teacher than I am. Of unbuttoning and buttoning the duvet cover buttons, and he'd never done it himself on his shirt. He had tried lots of times before, but you could see that he didn't quite have the fine motor control, he didn't have the dexterity, he didn't have the flexibility, as it were, to push the button through and then pull it through. He's been able to unbutton for a couple of months, but buttoning hasn't been there yet. So he came in and he said, just wave at the new joiner. Hi there. So he came in and he said, me doing my buttons. And then, as I said in my post, every button that he did took about 2.5 minutes. And he started at the top one. If you've seen the post, if you haven't seen the post, scroll down to Sunday and you'll see him. I just did a short snippet, but it was 10 minutes to do the whole shirt. It was really, really amazing, and he really persevered. Halfway through the second button, actually, you'll see in the video he moves to a stool to sit down because I think he probably realised this is going to be a long job. But it was really, really cute. It was really, really cute, and there was lots of sighing and deep breaths, and I just tried to stay as quiet as I could, and just he'd come close to me, so it was obvious that perhaps unconsciously he did feel like he needed a bit of support. And that's something we can really be aware of, actually, is that if our children are mastering something or trying to do something, they may come close to us for that physical support, for our presence, for that moral support. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to jump in and say something or rescue them or fix them or help them. It could be that they are coming for that physical support. So it's really worth bearing that in mind, that when they come to us, we don't necessarily need to say anything or do anything for them. They just want to be close to us. So yes, I just stayed really close to him and tried to be as quiet as possible and didn't interrupt him, and he completed it. And what I'd like to speak about this evening is how important, hello Joe, how important it is that we don't offer to help when our children are mastering something. And I mean, this is clearly when they're not frustrated, they're not upset. This is in a normal scenario, like the example in the video of Harry from Sunday. This is when they're not frustrated, they're not upset, there's not anything else going on. They are just in their process of doing something for themselves, of working something out for themselves. And so let's start with concentration. And concentration is so important in all of us, but particularly in young children. It's a muscle that needs to be grown, that needs to be exercised, that needs to be strengthened. Concentration isn't something that we are born with or magically comes, I don't know, age 15 when we need to sit our high school exams. It's something that can be developed over time. And this is a really huge subject, actually, and very, very important within a Montessori classroom about fostering concentration in young children. And there's lots of things we can do to support that in the classroom. But in the home, the simplest thing we can do is actually just not interrupt our children, not interfere, not interrupt. Don't speak to them if they're in the middle of something. And so if they're reading or they're doing some art or they're playing or they're doing their buttons up, whatever it might be, as long as pretty much the rule is, unless it's destructive or they're going to hurt themselves, don't interrupt, don't say anything. And it can be really hard for us parents, can't it, to not, when they're doing a picture, drawing a picture or doing a painting, to kind of lean over and ruffle their hair and say, oh, that's really beautiful, because we're their parent and that's what we want to do, right? But it's just, we've said this so many times in these Insta Lives, it's really honouring who they are and honouring their journey, trying not to make it about us and what we think about the picture or what we think about the book that they're reading, or how amazing we think they are because they've buttoned their shirt or put their shoes on or what have you. It's really about shining it on our child and allowing them to do what they need to do without our stuff getting in the way. So concentration is really critical, and if we can manage to just allow them to focus on whatever they're doing, then this will really go a long way to supporting them. And the second reason why we don't offer to help them is by practicing this skill, whether it's an old skill or a new skill, by practicing and repetition. This is how they build their inner sense of capability, their inner sense of self-esteem and confidence. And if we interrupt, then we've stopped that process of not only concentration, but we've stopped that process of completion. They may or may not complete after that. And if they don't complete, then it's a missed opportunity, isn't it? And if they do complete, but with our help, when they didn't need it, then again, we've taken something from them that we didn't really need to take. So they have such an intrinsic sense of self and a strong intrinsic reward from completing something for themselves without us rushing in to help, take over or interfere or say something. Because it seems altruistic when we want to help our young children, but actually, if they haven't asked for our help and they're just fine and they're not struggling and they're not upset, then we're actually inferring that they can't do it. We're actually inferring that we don't have that confidence that they can complete it. So it's just something for us to observe our behaviour and to be aware of not jumping in when it's not needed. And my third point about this first section about the importance of concentration and capability and confidence is just referring back to that point that if we break their concentration and if they lose their confidence, then they may not get back into that space again. And they may or may not repeat it later on in the day, but it's more that it can be a missed opportunity that there's no need to miss. Hello to Carla, who's just joined. I've got a really interesting point to make for the second part of why we don't help our children when they're completing a task. And I feel quite strongly about this, about children, about all of us actually, knowing ourselves and knowing how things feel. Hi Susan, how things feel in our bodies. And when we offer to help before they need it, now let me see if I can explain this properly. When we offer to help before our children really need it, then they don't really know when to ask for help. They don't recognise the signs, perhaps, within themselves of when they need to ask for help, when they're struggling with something, because someone has always taken that away from them, has actually said to them instead, I know better than you do, so they can't trust themselves. So that's why I say that, it prevents, I don't think I'm explaining this very well, am I? It's when we interfere before we need it, before they need it, they, over time, if we do it consistently, then they're not going to know when they really, really need help. They're not going to know when to ask for help, how to ask for help. They're not going to know when they're struggling. And this is not only in childhood, but then as an adult. How are they going to know when to ask help from a partner, from a co-worker, from their boss, from from one of their staff. They're not going to know when to ask for help. They're not going to know when they're struggling, because someone has always solved their problems before they've become problems. Okay, hopefully I've explained that now. It sounded really good in my head and when I wrote my notes, but I just couldn't get it out. So the third thing to talk about when we're discussing why we don't help our children when they are completing a task is really shining the light, I guess, of consciousness back on ourselves and thinking, okay, why do I really want to interfere at this time? Why do I really want to help at this time? And actually, if I use interfere rather than help, then it's a bit more loaded and it makes us feel a little bit more guilty about doing it. So let's use interfere instead. If we do interfere, then we can just ask ourselves with a little bit of gentle awareness, why are we doing it? Is it convenient just because we don't want the buttoning of the shirt to be 10 minutes long? Are we doing it because actually it's pretty agonizing to watch our children go through that process, isn't it? And if we're not used to it, it can feel really, really uncomfortable to just sit and watch. And you almost, even with Harry and his buttons, I almost was holding my breath every time the button almost came through. I was a bit like, oh, he's going to do it this time, he's going to do it this time, and then he didn't, and then it took 2.5 minutes for each one. And it's fine, but I managed to kind of catch myself. I don't know that I managed to regulate my breathing afterwards, but I did become aware that I was really the whole of my body was sort of tensed with bated breath, whether he was going to be able to button this button or not. So that's just a really interesting thing for us to note, that if we feel deeply uncomfortable with seeing our children strive for something, if we see our children uncomfortable at overcoming something, then it's something for us to look at for ourselves, isn't it? Because of course, naturally, we all want to make sure our children don't feel any discomfort and don't feel any pain and don't struggle and don't find things difficult. This may not be the best path for them long term, hey, I think, as we all know, but it's how we manage that in early childhood and how we manage our emotions dealing with it, and how we can support our children so that they can do what they need to do and they can carry on their unique journey and their unique trajectory. And it's all about us honouring their journey. And it seems that every single session, actually, we end up talking about this, don't we? The same two things is, one, observing how observing what they're doing. 3 things: observing what they're doing, 2, observing what we're feeling, and 3, honouring their journey. But it does keep coming back to that, doesn't it? So if we are interfering when we don't need to, we're not really honouring their journey, and that's something just for us to be aware of. And I really hope I'm making it clear. This isn't an opportunity for self-flagellation. This isn't an opportunity for us to beat ourselves up for the things that we are or we're not doing correctly. It's just us having that awareness of noticing our behaviour enough that we sometimes can behave a little bit differently, which will be for the benefit of our child and ultimately for the benefit of ourselves. And we are all going to get this right sometimes, and we're all going to get it wrong sometimes, no matter how much experience you have or how many children you have. And if anyone out there does know a way of never messing up, then please let me know, because I'd love to know your secret remedy, your secret formula, I mean. So when the second part of this wasn't it, what to do instead? So our child has come to us and they are doing their buttons, for example. Let's use Harry's example, and they've come to us and you've noticed that they've come physically close. So our first instinct could be, okay, they want us to dive in. Don't dive in. Sit in your hands and zip it. Just observe what they're doing. They may just want to be close to you, as we mentioned earlier, unconsciously, for that support, for your presence. So you're a silent cheerleader, but you are nonetheless a cheerleader, and they trust that they can be with you to try out new things, and they can be with you and feel safe with you to try new things and to try and to fail, and they feel comfortable doing that with us, their parents. So they might just want to be close to us. Hello, Suzanne, who's just joined. So physically support them, and when they've come close to you, just sit, just observe, just smile. We don't need to do anything else. You notice in the video a couple of times Harry would raise his eyes and would look at me and smile or say a couple of things. I didn't always understand what he was saying, but that didn't really matter. I just thought, let's just carry on and just give a reassuring smile. You don't need to say, oh, you're doing so well. You don't need to say, well done, or you're so clever, or anything. Just be with them in the moment. And actually, when we can get over the excruciating pain of watching the button go through in and out, in and out, in and out, and not going all the way through, it's actually really just so beautiful and exhilarating to watch them go through that piece of work, just to go through one by one and complete. And as I said at the beginning, Harry would like do this big sigh whenever he did a button. He would do this big sigh of like, I mean, I can only imagine what it was saying, but it was almost like this huge exhale of, oh, I've done another one. Oh, I've done another one. Oh, I've done another one. And that's just how he completed it. And so sit, observe, and smile. That is what to do instead. There's no secret to it. There's nothing special you need to do other than just be there with them in that moment. Honouring their journey. Observation, as we've spoken about in lots of other sessions, observation is how we understand our children. We observe to understand. We observe to understand them and what they're doing, and we observe to understand us and what our reactions are. Dr. Montessori talked about, I can't remember the exact quote, Suzanne might be able to tell me the exact quote, but she said that when we're educators, we have to tear out the roots of prejudice that we have against children. So all of our conditioned beliefs, our preconceived ideas about what children should or shouldn't be doing at each stage, at each age, we have to tear those out, and we just have to see the child new every day. And that's one of her most beautiful quotes, the child is new every day. So we can really immerse ourselves, like dive into this experience with our child of something so tiny, something that we take for granted as doing our buttons up or whatever it is, the skill that they're mastering. But these are these really special moments of childhood that you may actually then be able to recall in 10, 20, 30 years' time if we really had that bond and shared it with them in this way. I wonder if there's any questions at this point. If anyone have any questions, or should I just continue? As I did actually have a question from a follower regarding encouragement, and that the example was that if the child's halfway through their buttons and they come to you and they do directly ask for help. Okay, Zeus has asked a good question. Can I come back to that one, Zeus, and I'll just carry on with this one about encouragement? Actually, Zeus, if you could give me a bit more information on that, can you let me know? Just give me a scenario that you've had at home, that, and then once you've explained it to me, then I can have a think and we can talk it through together. Yes, so a follower said about encouragement. Our child's come to us and they've asked for help. They're not upset and they're not struggling. They've said, oh, mama help, or mama do this one, or I can't do it. If they're not at the upset stage, what you can do is offer encouragement. And what that looks like is acknowledging what they're doing. And for me, that would say something like, wow, these buttons are really fiddly, aren't they? You've done 2 already, haven't you? This is your 3rd one. Something as neutral as you can to draw their attention to what they're doing, acknowledge how far they've come, and validate that they are finding it tricky in that moment. Of course, once they start to get upset, if they start to get upset, then that's different. You're going to be guiding them through. But at the point where they've just asked for your help, it's offering as little as you can to get them through that stage. That's often all they need, is just a few words of encouragement. The cheerleader can speak for a few moments and then you'll need to be silent again. But yeah, I would say, this is fiddly, isn't it? Or you've done 2 already, or this is taking a while, isn't it? Or something like that. Something as neutral and, I guess, unemotional as possible. So you're not praising them, you're trying to not break their concentration and not take any of their power away. You want to keep all of their power with them. So I hope that answers your question on how to encourage. And again, you may need to do this back and forth a couple of times. There's 5 buttons on the shirt, and every 2 buttons you may need to have that dialogue again. And also with buttons is it can be a 2-person job. You know, they could push from one side and you can just gently pull the finger and thumb through, just to get them through that little hump in the road if it is, and then they can carry on again. Zuza, thank you. So okay, so Zuza has said, what if they really don't know what they're doing? Can we show them just one time? Zuza, for example, cracking an egg or cutting something. They're supposed to help them do it in a particular way. Should I not even get them involved if I have to guide them? Zuza, it depends on the age of the children, and if it's something that they're not going to be able to achieve for their age, then yes, don't set them up to fail. They need to be able to succeed at a certain point. With young children, nothing ever really ends up looking how we want it to be done, which I'm sure we are not that we want it to be done. Not it's bad for us to want something to be done in a different way. Sometimes this type of scenario can be us. Can the child do what I want them to do? Do they have the capability? Sometimes it can be I need to let go of my expectation of what this egg is going to look like by the time my 2-year-old has finished working with it. And sometimes, hi Saskia, and sometimes the third thing is if they're not ready for it, then we can present it to them and then offer to do it afterwards. Cooking and things like that it's a tricky one, because it can get really, really messy, and it's a difficult one to comment on. I think if you want a particular outcome, you might have to let go of that. If it's cooking and it's something that you can remedy afterwards, they can do what they need to do, then you can do that. And also what I often do with when the children were younger, less so now actually, but when the children were younger, is we'd each be doing the same thing, but they'd have their own bowls or their own bit of pizza dough, or as you said, like their own egg or something like that. So they could do it in their own bowls, and it wasn't going to be a disaster and mess up the whole recipe. If they got it right with no shell in it, then it could go in the main bowl with the rest of the cake or whatever you're making, or the omelette. So you may need to break it down more for them, and for your children of different ages, it's deconstructing what you're actually doing. Your older child is going to be able to do more than your younger child, probably. So it's, if you know that they can do this, they already have mastered this skill, then it's just being close support and physical support and the silent cheerleader. If they need guidance, then give them guidance. If it's too difficult for them, then take a step back and see how you can make it accessible for them. I hope that helps. Are there any other questions, or shall we move on to the next bit? I feel like there may not be any other questions. And look at timings. Oh goodness, we've done 30 minutes, so that's good. That's not too bad. So to recap, if we don't have any other questions, I wanted to just reiterate what we've said in all of these lives actually, and as I said earlier, about really honouring our children's journey and coming back to understanding them, and that means observing them and observing ourselves. And Carla's just said another question. Am I saying that we don't help? Oh, sorry, she said, are you saying that we don't help unless they get upset? Yes, you'll obviously know your child better than I would, but if, for example, the buttoning scenario, then you feel like they just need a bit of moral support, then give them that moral support. It's I guess the difference is in the scenario, because it's really interesting of, you know, where that point of concentration is. You know, if they're asking for help and you know that they can't do it, then you're going to need to guide them. If they're asking for help and you know that they can do it, but they need a little bit of help in that moment, then it's the smallest amount of help that you can give them at that moment to get them through that little bump in the road, and they can, you know, flow freely again. That's what I would say. Like, if a word of encouragement will do, if they come to you and ask you directly for help, then try and talk them through it. So your first stage is sit, observe and smile. Your second stage is moral support, and your third stage is physical support. But it's coming back to doing as little as possible to get them through, without obviously looking that you're trying to be obtuse or trying to be difficult about it. It's really trying to meet them where they are in that moment, and that moment's going to be different, of course, depending on whether they're tired or hungry and what type of mood they're in that day. But if we're talking about something like mastering a new skill that you know that they've been working on for a while, like buttoning or shoes or what have you, buttoning their shirt or putting their shoes on or something, if you know they've been working on it for a while and this seems like the first time they've done it on their own, or the first couple of times they've done it on their own, then just really try and be there in silent observation, I think is what I say. Yes, as Carla said, yeah, the minimum amount of help to get them through. Yeah, that's always what we're looking for. When we take over is when it becomes about us, not about them. And it's just being aware of that, conscious of that we're doing that. So yes, to round up, coming back to observing our child to understand them, observing us and our reactions and our feelings to understand us, and honouring their journey. It's all about them, and they grow, all human beings grow into capable, confident human beings who understand about community and understand about empowerment and raising each other up and the interdependence of life on earth. They learn this from how we behave with them in the home, and if we can give them the dignity and respect to allow them to concentrate and that confidence that they can do it themselves by being silent observers, and letting them ask for help when they need it, not jumping in and interfering, letting them trust their own bodies, let them know when they need that help, and trusting them and their journey, and observing what it is that their needs are, then I think that's something we can all aspire to do, a tiny, tiny bit of that every day. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. This has been 35 minutes as ever. This is my magic number. And I look forward to seeing you again on Friday. And we have got a really juicy topic for Friday, which is why we don't make our children share. And that means sharing with their siblings, that means sharing with their friends, that means sharing their food, that means sharing their toys. Thank you for the hearts, by the way. Why we don't make our children share. Thanks, Susa. So that's what we're going to be discussing on Friday evening, which is a really good one, and I hope we're going to have a really nice juicy debate about sharing, because it's something that we hear all the time, isn't it? And that if we don't make our children share, then they're going to become grabby and spoiled and entitled and selfish. And what's really, really interesting, I'm going to waffle on too much about this now, what's really, really interesting in the psychology about it is actually when we don't make them share, it makes them more open and more giving and more kind. So yes, thank you, Joe. I look forward to seeing you on Friday as well. And if you have any questions about sharing in advance, you'd like me to read prior to the live stream, then send them to me. Otherwise, I will see you on Instagram again tomorrow. Take care. Lots of love, friends. Bye-bye.